Tamils are proficient in English, mathematics, and science, be it on the other side of the Indian Ocean, that is Sri Lanka, or be it in India, in the state of Tamil Nadu. Hello, friends. Vanakkam, namaskaram to all of you. My name is Amit Mahajan, and I welcome you all to my YouTube channel, Layman History and Geopolitics. So, friends, today we are going to talk about Sri Lanka. We are going to talk about Tamils. This is the second episode in the series that we started. In the first episode, what we talked about was how the historical findings prove that in Sri Lanka, Tamils are the original sons of the soil, how the Iron Age excavations have proved this fact. In this episode, we will talk about the how the treatment was meted out to Tamils after the independence of Sri Lanka in 1948, and what factors led to the rise of LTTE and other extremist organizations, as people would call them. Some would call them as pro independence movements, some would call them as extremist movements. The choice is yours. But let us, as of now, let's concentrate on the part is what were the reasons that the Tamils were forced to take up arms. So the friends are in 1948. Tamils constituted something around 21 to 23% of the population of Sri Lanka. There were basically two groups in Tamils, three groups mainly. One was Sri Lankan Tamils, who were basically the sons of the soil, who were from generations, prehistoric times living in Sri Lanka, primarily in the northern and the eastern parts. Second were the Indian Tamils, who were taken by British to work in the plantations, tea and coffee plantations, in the rubber industry. And thirdly, there were the Moors, who were classified different from the Tamils. Muslims, they were Moors, Muslims. They spoke Tamil, but for some political reasons, they have been differentiated now from the Tamils. They are not in the Tamil community group as listed by the Sri Lankan government. So in 1948, the thing was that the population of Tamils was something around 21 22%, but they held around 60% of the government jobs. Reason being that the Tamils were far better educated than the other communities in Sri Lanka. They had better access to education. There were two reasons for this. First reason was that basically they were concentrated in the northern and eastern parts of Sri Lanka, which were not very fertile. Since they were not very fertile, the parents pushed their children to learn English, science, and mathematics and apply for government jobs. Thus, the ratio of educated people in Tamils was quite high. Second reason was that as the British came in Sri Lanka, they started imparting English education, and the Tamils, in response, opened up their schools. They started imparting English education on their own to their children. They opened various schools in Jaffna, and thus uh, the increase in English language, English knowledge was very high prevalent among the Tamils in Sri Lanka. And we are talking about the 1930s, 40s, 50s. And Tamils were basically, though numerically they were less, but owing to their proficiency in English and their wisdom in mathematics and science, they landed up good government jobs. Now, what happens in 1948? Sri Lanka becomes independent. And when the new government comes in, what does it do? It passes the Ceylon Citizenship Amendment Act, Ceylon Citizenship Act 1948. And what does this act do? This act strips all Indian Tamils from Sri Lankan citizenship. Overnight, they become nationless. India did not recognize them either as their citizens. So those were the people who did not have any citizenship of any country. And look at the plight of people at that time. What would have happened to them? In 1964, what happens is Indian government signs an accord with Sri Lanka, and people are brought to India. Some 60, it was on 60-40 ratio. 60% of people were given Indian citizenship, they were brought to India, and 40% people were given Sri Lankan citizenship. And in 1987, it was in 1987 when the extremist movement was at on high, that 230,000 Indian Tamils were granted their citizenship of Sri Lanka. So this was the very first awakening happening, which led to tensions in the Tamil community. That was Ceylon Citizenship Act 1948. Second thing was Sinhala Only Act 1956. Bandaranaike becomes Prime Minister of Sri Lanka in 1956. He was a far right politician and he drove to power on the back of Sinhalese support. So, what does he do? He feels that Tamils are basically eating the cream of they are the cream of the society. They are having all the government jobs, they are holding good positions everywhere. So, what does he do? He tries to belittle the Tamil pride. He do first? He the government took a decision that Sinhala would be adopted as official language and administrative language of Sri Lanka in 1956. Basically, the thing was that the Sri Lankan government said in the very beginning what their idea was. Their idea was that Sinhala would be made the official language and Sinhala plus Tamil will be used for administrative purposes. But then what happens is a certain person, a certain professor by the name of Mr. Jayasuriya goes on fast unto death. And due to his pressure, the government takes its steps back and Bhandaranaike declares that now here on, Sinhalese would be the official language and the administrative language of Sri Lanka. So what happens to the Tamils? They are left in cold. Prior to independence, English used to be the official language of Sri Lanka. Now, what happens to this English learned elite? They are left out in the cold. Tamils feel that it is an attack on their identity, their language, and their economic prospects. So, uh, it goes against the Tamil wishes, Tamil people. And after that, what happens is Gal Oya riots happen in Sri Lanka. So Gal Oya, what was that place? It was a river. And what happens around there is some irrigation projects are taking place, and people from all parts of Sri Lanka, Sinhalese, Vedas, Muslims, Tamils are being settled around there. Basically, the majority of population, the proportion of people who are being settled is Sinhalese. Around 50% people that are being settled there are Sinhalese, and what happens around there is riots take place, language riots take place, and many Tamils lose their lives. So this was the very first riot that took place after Sri Lanka independence, which led to feigning of sentiments, and Tamils felt let down. Now, what happens after this is, as Sinhalese was made the national language, the official language, administrative language, what happens is that in you see license plates in vehicles. So, in license plates of vehicles, since Sinhalese was the official language, the Sri sign in Sinhali language was imprinted on all the vehicles. Now, what happens is Federal Party, which is the party of Tamils, starts campaigns against it, and what they also Federal Party also conducted satyagrahas when the Sinhalese was made the sole official language of the union. So what happens is when all these things go on, Federal Party starts wearing vehicles which are carrying Sri signs. So they call this anti-Sri campaign. After that, what happens is Tamil establishments now encounter production. What the Sinhalese people do in the south of the country, they start smearing black ink or whatever it may be on Tamil establishments, Tamil houses, Tamil people. Even Tamil people faces they start smearing with black all. So this is what was happening. And after that, what happens is in 1958, again the riots happen. Some 400 uh, Tamil uh, sailors were laid off in Trincomalee, I believe, and they were about to be settled in some district in Sri Lanka. The government had a plan, but the Buddhist groups went against it. They said, let's boycott Tamil. And the riots start all over the place. Many Tamils are killed. And this is how the ethnic tensions continue to rise. Remember, by that time, Sri Lankan army used to be something around 40% of the army used to be Tamil people. So it was a very multi-composite country, multi-composite army. But then these decisions led to antagonization of Tamil people. Thirdly, what happens is Sinhalese government, what does the Sri Lanka government do? It starts settling Sinhalese settlers in the areas which are predominantly Tamil. That's in the eastern parts and the northern parts of Sri Lanka. Now they are taken out from their wetlands, which have a very high density of population, and they are being settled in sparsely populated uh, areas in Tamil areas, which don't have very much fertile irrigation or very fertile lands, but still they are being settled in these areas. And what does it lead to? It leads to demographic change. So what people think is, the Tamils think that government is trying to do is they are trying to break a continuous link that is between the north and the east, and in the middle they are trying to build up the Sinhalese settlements, and they are trying to disrupt us. So they consider this as an attack on their very identity. They feel that government is deliberately doing this because the Senali settles were given lands on concessions, but these concessions were not provided to Tamil people. So the government was biased here. And fourthly, the nail in the coffin was the standardization policy. So what the government does is the government brings policy of standardization. As per this policy of standardization, uh, what the government felt was that the Tamils have a less percentage of population, but they have a greater amount of government jobs. So what the government wanted was to deprive Tamils of these government jobs and bring the Sinhalese in their places. So if earlier on when you went to a university, language was a criteria, 27% people who wrote these exams in during 1971 mentioned Tamil as their language. Now, what the government did was government brought in district quotas, and secondly, what the government did was that if a Tamil and a Sinhalese are applying for a course, the Tamil has to score more marks than a Sinhalese, and then he would get admission in that particular course. Basically, it was in science faculties in mathematics. So Sinhalese had to, for admission, a Sinhalese would have to score less marks to make that cutoff, and the Tamil would have to get more marks. So, and later on, this policy was adopted in public sector jobs also. And as a result of it, only less than 10% of the government jobs were now available for Tamils. So it was a blatant misrule, blatant misuse of power, and Tamils were deprived of all their rights in Sri Lanka. So what they started seeking during the 1950s, 60s was a greater autonomy. Uh, Secondly, what they wanted was that Tamil should be declared as official language along with the Sinhalese. And thirdly, what they wanted was security and opportunity. Security, opportunity for their children. Security, opportunity, and jobs for their children. Now, in 1974, what happens is all the Tamil political parties join up, and Tamil United Liberation Front is formed, and it is led by SJV Chelvanayakam. So this gentleman was in forefront of Tamil politics since the very beginning after independence. He is appointed as head of the party. And in Vadukoti resolution, uh, what happens is they demand a free, sovereign, secular, socialist state of Tamil Ealam. Now, what you see how the things turn out from being a population that was friendly to the Sinhalese, Tamils are antagonized, and what they come to is for demanding a separate state, a separate Elam for themselves. In 1977, elections take place, and in Northeast, TULF, Tamil United Liberation Front, sweeps the elections, wins 18 seats, and it fights the elections on secessionist flank, wins the seats, becomes the main opposition party. And in same year, in 1977, Jaffna Carnival riots take place. After that, in 1981, Jaffna Public Library is burnt by Sinhalese. And in 1983, worst of all, the July massacre, July, the Black July program take place, in which around 15,000 people, 5,000 people are killed, and 150,000 people lose their homes. Such was the tragedy, and these were basically the factors. First was the Citizenship Act. Second was the Tamil only policy, the Sinhalese only policy. Third was the settling of settlers in Tamil areas. And fourth was the standardization policy, which led to Tamil masses going away from the Sri Lanka mainstream. And these factors eventually led to the armed conflict, for about which we'll talk in the next episode. That was all from me me for today. My name is Amit Mahajan. I request all of you to kindly like, subscribe, and share my YouTube channel, Layman History and Geopolitics. Vanakkam. Thank you. Namaskar.